All right, gang, and welcome back to lesson 4 on how to do this flatscape. So, we're taking a look at this. We're going to go ahead now and we're going to add in some whites. And we're going to add in some bright whites there. And now we're going to go into the mountains. And we're going to choose each mountain. We're going to make sure our soft airbrush is chosen. And we're just going to go ahead now and cap off some of these. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink that down a little bit. And again, I'm just going to go through and make sure that we've got the general idea down. Now that one's going to be very close. This one's going to be very close. That one is going to be very, very muted. So, all right, cool. So we got that figured out. Now let's take care of the highlights on some of these mountains here. I'm going to go back to this area. We're going to then bring this up. All right. We're going to make sure we got our soft airbrush. Crank up the size. And we're going to make sure that we've got the right mountain selected. And then we're going to do this mountain. All right, cool. Now, see the background is still a little bit bright for me. Let's go back down to our background layer. Grab our palette, grab this, grab a darker color, crank our soft airbrush up, and because it's behind everything else, we can go ahead now and kind of gradient that. We're going to go one step further and go deeper toward the black. And you see how it changes the entire mood of the entire painting. All right, now we're going to use a different technique here on the moon. So let me show you a technique. We're going to go ahead here. We're going to find our moon layer. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mask that layer. Now watch what happens. Remember, black conceals, white reveals. So let's grab black and let's drag it onto the mask layer. Whoop, there went our moon completely. But where did it go? It's still under there. What we have to do now is paint in white in order to reveal it. So that we can get a really nice transparency effect using that soft airbrush. If we take the opacity down, crank it up, and now let's reveal the moon a little bit at a time here. And now over on this side, I'm going to fully reveal the moon. And then I'm going to fill in kind of that area back here. You see how we get a nice transition there? Whole different effect on the moon coming out of there. All right, so now once we've got that, we can go through and let's create a star layer. So we're going to come up to here. We're going to grab our tree layer or whatever's on top, and we're going to create a layer of stars. Now we're going to name it. We're going to call it star layer. Okay. Now, what could we ever use for stars? Well, let's take a look at our luminance. We got glimmer. I kind of like the glimmer ones. All right, now I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do this. So the glimmer brush, you can go through with the glimmer brush, crank up the opacity. Oops. How about we change the color, eh? How about that? That'll work. Okay, and it doesn't matter if you go over the mountains. And again, with glitter, a little goes a long way, right? Now here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop that down to right above that layer, but below everything else. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to maybe put a couple shining stars in there. So let's go ahead now and let's grab the flare, but let's go ahead and add a new layer. All right, so we're going to add a new layer. I'm going to call this the flare layer. All right, perfect. Now this brush takes a little bit of getting used to. You don't want it to be big, bright, and bold. and it really puts it in some weird spots. So you see that there, it's nowhere near where my brush cursor was touching. All right. So I think that's a pretty good effect. But now, the reason that we did this as a flare layer, check this out. We're going to go to the normal blend mode. We're going to lighten this bad boy up. And you see how the difference between lighten, screen, and add changes substantially? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep that in the add blend mode. Now look at what that just did to our picture. Completely different look, and it made it so that all of the highlights there onto the mountains made a whole lot of sense. So coming full circle on this, let's go ahead and add in a couple more on the mountain. Let's go ahead and change over to our airbrush. And now this makes a lot of sense to go ahead and shrink this thing down and get a much brighter type of reflection on here. Okay. All right, so that'll work. Same thing here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try the same thing with the moon. I haven't tried this, so I might be headed for disaster. Who knows? So we're going to go ahead, we're going to change the blend layer out, and we're going to go here, and we're going to go to add. And I actually really like that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep that. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to tint some of this. So let's go ahead and with our soft airbrush selected, let's grab the purplish tint here. And let's bring the opacity down super low because this is going to be a very subtle technique. And let's grab this guy right here. Let's create a new layer. Okay. And then let's do the same thing here to here. We'll got a new reflected light layer there. And let's go ahead and tint that bad boy just a little bit. Okay. All right. So you kind of got the idea. You've used a lot of different techniques in this area. You know what I would do actually as a parting shot here? Let's go ahead and add in one more technique. We're going to add a noise adjustment to that moon. All right. So I think we're in pretty good shape there with that. One more thing. Sorry, guys. There's always one more thing. Let's go ahead and add in to that layer. Let's go ahead and create a little bit of background contrast. So I've got my airbrush. I've got my dark green selected. And now I've got my size all the way up. I'm going to crank up my opacity. And I'm going to add in a little bit of fade into the background so that it looks like we're actually fading into nothing. Oh. All right, now, why did I undo that? What was missing? Alpha lock. I painted on my mountains. Not good. Remember, alpha lock is your friend. Okay. Now, if you wanted to, you could add in some highlights and some shadows for the trees. You see where the trees are here? You can go through and you can add in some shadows for the trees if you wanted to. And remember, the light's coming from the side, so it's going to cast out to the side toward the right-hand side of this picture. All right, folks, so that's a little bit about the Flatscape. Congratulations on your first Flatscape. All right, let's get into the next projects and take this Procreate tool to a new level. See you in the next one.